I started my day in therapy. I ended my day in therapy. And now I'm coping with alcohol. Welcome to Launchpad. Well, Dr. Will, welcome to the show.
It's a delight to be here. It really is.
It's great to have you on. So we talk about, why entrepreneurials would need a therapist on a pretty regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I have one. I actually started the day at my therapist's office. Now I'm interviewing one, which is...
Well, you know, the easiest diagnosis to give anybody, if you want to kind of be cocky about it, you can just say, well, it's clear you have an adjustment disorder, because that generic term applies to anybody. And what does it mean? It just, as it says, it's like you're going through changes and you're struggling to adjust to it. Sometimes you adjust well, sometimes not. So you can always use that. Well, it sounds to me like you have an adjustment disorder, and you can always go with that. But you know what? When you're an entrepreneur, as you are, and my career really is like entrepreneurial, I guess. It means that if you have the ability to cope with a change in adjustment, and you get energized by it, and you get rattled sometimes, you get energized by it, and like push ahead, you know, you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because you can handle the adjustment challenges, the adjustment disorder.
So you do not have an adjustment disorder as
an entrepreneur? No, you've overcome it. I've now pronounced that you've overcome any adjustment disorder you ever had. And I can't go for the future now, Josh. It's possible. I don't know if
I could hit a wall at any moment.
I don't see that happening.
Find myself in the fetal position on my office floor.
No, there's no vibe or mojo coming off you that says you're gonna be stopped. You'll just be doing something different, maybe, but that's good.
Yeah, that's as you said before the mics were on. The ADD, bouncing from one thing to the next.
You know, so there's really something about that. It's like anyone who is, you know, goes into something entrepreneurial. You presume, and you know this better than me as an entrepreneur. It's like, you know, you're passionate about the thing you got your eyes on to go do, but then there are so many variables you can't control that having the ability to cope with change and unpredictability is an essential quality for an entrepreneur. And
I would agree with that.
You know, and so you have to be ready to like, well, okay, that door's shut. Let's try it this way. So you're still going after your long-term goal, but you have the ability to adjust and kind of tap dance around the obstacles that come up.
I'm also good at drinking my way through it.
Well, it's a coping mechanism.
So it's a good thing, right?
No question. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, calms you. You know, everyone has anxiety to some degree. Yeah, that's right. Everyone has anxiety, and it's a good medicine. It's just like you don't want to overdose on your prescription medicine. You don't want to overdose on your alcohol, but it helps me quite a lot.
Well, and I mean, I wouldn't want to meet the person that didn't need that. They'd probably be a pretty scary individual to...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no drinking is a sign of, well, it's an issue, put it that way.
So you have quite an amazing roster of things that you've done, been involved in. I mean, let's start at the beginning. And you've obviously ended up with an entrepreneurial endeavor of keynote speaking, which is...
I think you get a kick out of my Reader's Digest biography. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, blue-collar family, and went to Catholic school. As one of the comedians used to say, you know, I knew all about S&M. I was beaten by little women in black dresses my whole childhood. So, you know, I went to Catholic school. Then I went to college. Back in the day, this is like, I'm a real classic baby boomer back in the day. And you went to college. You just went to college. You know, I couldn't afford it, didn't have the grades, but I did it anyway. And then when I got out, it was 1971, and they had the draft lottery during Vietnam. They were drafting you into the Army. I was number one. I won the freaking lottery. Honestly, my birthday came up number one. So I graduated on a Friday. Monday, my ass was in a truck. I was, you know, in basic training. I thought I was going to go to Vietnam, but I didn't because they were pulling. Anyway, long story short, so I get out of the Army, but I had to do 6 years in the Army. And then got out, went to graduate school.
I can't even fathom that at this moment.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have a choice, really.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, I can't fathom the government being like, well, I guess you're enrolled in the Army now, son.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
It blows my mind.
No question. Yeah, it's like okay, you know, there you go. And but I was raised in a really strict Catholic family, and so I remember calling my father. Was a big World War II guy, a hero really. And I remember in basic training calling home and And he goes, "How you doing with your drill sergeant?" And I blurted out. He never forgot this. I said, "Oh, this guy's nothing compared to Mom. Mom kicked my ass way more." So I went to graduate school. And then in 1978, my brother was in law school in New York, and he was going to the new comedy clubs. They were new at the time, the Improvisation, Comic Strip, Catch a Rising Star. And he says, "Man, you can do this." And so I quit my job in Massachusetts and moved down to New York and became a stand-up comic. And I had a teaching job in the day and was doing stand-up at night. And stand-up is an amazing entrepreneurial, and I think this is maybe one of the first points I'd like to make to your listeners about entrepreneurial. It is, I don't know that there's another career that is so focused on you as an individual performer. I mean, even as a musician, if you're in a band, you sort of, the other folks with you kind of pad it. But comedy is so frickin' raw that, either people love you or they hate you, which means that you're in front of nice people or you're in front of assholes. And and you can't do anything about it.
It's probably one of the most vulnerable places anyone could ever put themselves.
So, Josh, what therefore happens to you after you do it night after night after night? It kind of develops a thick skin for you about, when they say, "Oh, there's no bad audience." Ask any comic. Of course, there are bad audiences. There are people called sociopaths, and they're bad audiences. So, but anyway, as an entrepreneur, you have a very singular career. It's you with the agents and the bookers. Okay, fine. So you have to manage your business, the business of Will Miller. But guess what? You and I are comics together. We're all hanging out together. I mean, what gets you through are the 20, 25, 30 comics, very different in style. You may not even like their act. It doesn't matter. But it's together that you do it. I think the hardest part for an entrepreneur who's really a soul entrepreneur is building that kind of connection of other people who support you through thick or thin and who kind of know what you're going through.
It is, and it can be a fatal area of the sole entrepreneur growth, that position for moving from your individual self to having to work with a team.
Yes,
can be undoing of it, of what you're doing, because a lot of times entrepreneurs don't want to let go of things.
Yep.
Yeah. So
well, because
I've seen that happen.
You have to. In other words, I mean this in the most sincere way. You are a visionary, and you have a vision of what you'd like to have actualized. You're envisioning it. Well, you hope and you try and get people who share the vision, who are not just sort of working with you or for you and are going on your vision, but that they share the vision. And that's a hard thing to communicate. And in comedy, we all had the same vision, although we were separate little companies, if you will.
Yeah.
And that helps
your own
get you
brand
through it.
of
Exactly.
things to sell.
That's right. Yep. So I did that, and I was that for a long time, and I remember my first job was at the Pittsburgh Comedy Club, and it was I think it was kind of a mafia club. Really, it was kind of really tough guys who ran it, And here I was, and so I was the MC, my first out of town gig in Pittsburgh. T.P. Mulrooney, who's still working as a Chicago comic now, and Jay Leno. And Jay Leno at the time, this is like 82, was well known among the comics. He had a few Tonight shows, but he really was not a star because it was before Letterman. And so we were in the green room, and TP's going, "Man, my career is really frustrating." He goes, and so Leno goes, "Well, how long have you been doing it?" And he goes, "About 6 years." He goes, "Every night?" He goes, "Yeah, in Chicago, every night, perform every night." So he goes, "All right, 6 years, that means you just know who you are on stage." That's what he said.
No shit.
He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You perform every night for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. You're chiseling away, making your voice, and you know who your identity is. You know what your persona is." He goes, and Leonard goes, "I believe this is when it starts. You put 5 to 7 years to know who you are. That's when your career begins."
I'd say it's about the same for an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're chiseling out what your identity is and what it is, and then you have mastery at around that time, doing it every day.
Is that the 10,000 hours? I don't know if the math is on that.
No, that's exactly right. It really is, and so it was pretty wise. And it was like that's when you're selling what you're doing, and so there I was. And so after 10,
you're still trying to figure out what you're making up until that point.
Well, yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah. So then at about 12 years was 1990, and my first little media break was I became a therapist. I went back to Columbia University and became a shrink. I was doing stand-up.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
It actually kind of does. I mean,
well, in other words, like, okay, you could say, "Oh, we have Will Miller. He's an entrepreneur." No, he's nuts. Maybe he's just nuts. But anyway, so I was going to school in the day because it was like, I was working every night, 7 nights a week, and I was taking classes in the day. Became a shrink, and I just really loved that, and it helped me with the other comedians because, we were all trying to deal with our adjustment disorders. Well, anyway, so
comedians, all the ones I've met have some pretty checkered past.
Oh yeah,
they're pretty
absolutely.
messed up individuals.
Yeah, they're colorful.
Yes,
they put it that way. And so the producer, one of the writers of Nickelodeon, Nick at Nite, Tom Hill, approached us and he said, "I have an idea for a character for you, and this character would be called Dr. Will, television therapist." And we filmed these things, and I looked like I was a therapist in an office.
I watched one today. It was great.
Yeah, it's hilarious, right? And I'm like, and I'm analyzing, Gilligan's Island is a show about rage. Here's a young man who, through his ineptitude, essentially destroyed the lives of 6 other people. You're sitting here wondering, would this be the episode where one of the other castaways rise up and murder Gilligan in retaliation? And then we go, bong, bong, bong. Nick and I talked about, and then I would come back and I would go, what about you? Do you have a part of yourself that sabotages your well-being? Let me tell you, unless you slay your inner Gilligan, you'll never be off the island of your loneliness. That's how I was doing that. And it was just an over-the-top hilarious. Yeah. And I did about 20 of these on different characters. I Dream of Jeannie and Lassie, etc. And
I watched was it the Dick Van Dyke one?
The Dick Van Dyke, yeah, right. Why does he trip over the ottoman? Yeah.
Why is it always there?
Exactly, that's right, yeah. Or is it possible that he's tripping himself? That's right. Fear of success. So anyway, at the time, I'm touring a comedian, and I came out to Indianapolis to headline a Crackers. And so part of the routine back in the day was you would go on to the local radio shows promoting you, and no matter what city you were in, Kansas City, LA, whatever. And so I go on the Bob and Tom show here, and Tom found out he loved the Nick at Night stuff, and he found out that I was a real shrink, and so they invited me to kind of be a regular cast member as their therapist. And so I was rarely on as a comic. And a lot of the people who knew me from Bob and Tom don't know me as a stand-up. They knew me as Dr. Will, the therapist.
An actual therapist.
Exactly right. Yeah, dealing with them, which was really a blast.
What you are, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. And then I had a TV show on NBC for a year called The Other Side, which was whacked. It was like, it was a show about paranormal experiences and stuff, and I did it for a year. It was in the old Tonight Show studio, and so I was on camera every day for an hour, and I was like, ugh, I didn't really like the show. I mean, the show was great except for the show. It was like, talking to people who were like basically kind of lunatics, actually. And so I quit and went back to corporate speaking. Now I do corporate speaking. I do like entertainment and at companies, and that's my entrepreneurial.
Yeah, your stage presence is fantastic. By the way, I watched a couple clips today.
Oh, cool! Yeah. Well, 20 years of stand-up, man. I tell you what, it kicks at India. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
So you've been doing that for?
That for probably now 15 years. I'm a senior citizen.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. I'm 66, baby. Yeah.
So
I had a lot of fun in the past. I went to Woodstock.
The Woodstock?
I was at the Woodstock. I'm old enough to have said I went to the Woodstock.
How old were you when that was going on?
19. It was 1960.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah,
you have any good Woodstock
I
stories?
saw Jimi Hendrix play the Star Spangled Banner.
No shit.
Yeah, Monday morning. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My brush with it. No one knew it was going to be.
How do you remember it?
Well, actually, there's an even funnier story that I think you'll like. But anyway, back in the day in the big cities, it was AM radio, not FM. It was AM radio. That's all you listened to was AM radio. Those were the rock stations. And so the hottest in New York was, I think it was WNBC or something like that. And so everyone kind of knew there was a Woodstock festival with a whole bunch of great acts coming there, but no one could get tickets. And so on Thursday afternoon in New York radio in drive time, the DJ comes on and he goes, "The state police have asked us to issue a warning that there are no more tickets at Woodstock, and thousands of young people are going up trying to get tickets. Do not go to Woodstock." Literally. Well, shit, that night, 100,000, 200,000 people from Connecticut, New Jersey, and New
promo,
York.
Guys.
Yeah, and just stormed the place, and like 1 million people showed up. And so I was one of those idiots right after my job. I was working at a supermarket, and my friend, Larry and I, we just kind of got in the car and we went up there.
That's
had
absolutely
to work about 5
fantastic.
months. Yeah. So then I call home to tell my mother, call collect, tell my parents, I went to Woodstock. And so my mother goes, "Oh, your cousins are all there." I said, "Really?" Yeah. The Linors and the McKeowns, they're all there. I said, "Oh, okay, good. Where do I find them?" Well, it turns out my great aunt May owned a farm about a mile away from Woodstock. Are you kidding me? I'm not. It sounds like I'm making this up, but it's true. And so she says, go over there. She'll take care of you. So we find out, we walk over to Aunt May's. All my cousins are there. So when everyone was sleeping outside, I was in Aunt May's cabin with my cousins, and then we would kind of walk over to the festival. I was the cleanest dressed guy in the whole damn.
How cush is that?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Because that festival had to have been a complete shit show. I mean, even today they're a mess, and they're very well organized.
And the mud, and it was great, but it was so edgy and out there. It was like no rules. It was. You know what? It's something that I think a lot of young people long for now. Is just like, we don't want to be into like breaking through rules in a negative, violent way. But man, just get off my case. Do you know what I mean? Just shut up about it.
Well, there just wasn't any rules, right?
No, that's right.
It was like the first thing of its kind.
I was a 19-year-old kid, and I looked at stuff people do in there that a young man should not look at. Sex and just right. I was like, oh my God, I had a sheltered life. It's like people just having sex on the lawn. It was like, oh my God, it was great.
It was like pictures from the snake pit back in the day.
Yeah.
Those are amazing.
That's right. Exactly.
I've heard of some pretty great stories about the snake pit.
And what was great is you could sort of like wander your way through the crowd, and you get close to the stage, go to the back of the stage. It was on this beautifully sloped hill. And it was awesome. And the other thing too, which was, I think music was healthy then, like it kind of is now in a way, because the mix of genres, Country Joe and the Fish, The Who, Jimi Hendrix, Joan Baez, all of these like folkies and hard rockers all mingled. And, there was less sort of like, I'm into this band, but not into that. Everyone was into like all of the music. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. One big conglomerated party of
exactly.
Awesome.
That's right. Yep. So yeah, it was a blast. Yeah.
So why psychotherapy? Why'd you go back to school? What was the driving force behind that?
Well, I've always been kind of self-directed, and I've always had this insatiable curiosity about what makes human beings tick. I mean, because
I've become absolutely enthralled with it in the past 2 years. I needed some place to go.
Yeah.
So I started, through the course of life, found myself a therapist, because it's doing my job is not an easy one. And it's nice to have somebody who really doesn't give a shit to talk to. If that makes, I don't.
No. You've hit the button about why psychotherapy works. Yeah. Let me tell you a story and illustrate it this way.
Sure.
One time I remember I had a family send their son to me for therapy. Okay, he was 17 years old, Ralph, and Ralph came, and the reason that they sent him was because he couldn't get along with his father. He hated his father, and he was being defiant. And so Ralph comes in, and I said, well, what's going on with you and your father? He goes, man, he's a butthead. That's all he says. He's a butthead. That's all he would say. And so I asked him, well, why is he being there? He goes, I don't know. He's a butthead. It went on like that. So at the end of the session, I said, all right, you're going to come back next week. I said, but between now and then, I want you to ask your mother or somebody, not your father, talk to somebody about what's going on with your father. Why do you think he won't let you drive the car? He didn't trust you. So the kid comes back a week later, and he's like, oh, my God, you're not going to believe this. He goes, it turns out that my father had a twin brother named Ralph, I'm named after him, who was killed in a car wreck at 17. Well, ding, 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 hello, Dr. Freud, hello, McFly. The reason that the father was having some problems was because he was a fear, well, instead of the idiot father, the father was a butthead. Why didn't he tell him this? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the point about what you're making at psychotherapy. Suppose he didn't come to a professional therapist. Suppose he went to his Uncle Larry, who's an idiot. He's just an absolute idiot.
Most Uncle Larrys are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Uncle Larry the idiot. And he says, man, Dad's a buddy. He won't let me drive the car. Even Uncle Larry would say, of course not, you jerk, because our brother Ralph was killed in a car wreck. You look just like him, named after him. I'll go talk to him. Don't worry about it. The objectivity of not being involved in the emotion gives you an asset to look. The other thing that happened to me was my first training was on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in Chinatown at a crack cocaine clinic. So I'm a comic at night, and I'm doing that in the day. And
you had to really develop some good material for your stand-up.
Well, I used to say that to people. I would say, comics would say, man, that's great material. I said, yeah, but they were so different. How do I talk about, heroin addicts and schizophrenics in comedy? Hey, so, so I couldn't do. I just kept them separate. But one of my mentor therapists said, if you're going to learn to be a therapist, and you don't want to, and you don't see yourself working over the course of your life with very, very, very ill people like this population, train with them anyway, because when you see people who have severe mental illness, it helps you when you're dealing with people who are healthier, because you see what the bottom is. And so then when you're talking to people who are functional, who are smart, who are really intelligent and gifted, and they're struggling and they themselves feel like, oh my God, this is awful, you kind of carry an optimism for them that they don't have. It's like you don't say it out loud, but it's like, I know what coming apart as a human being looks like. And you're struggling, and I have empathy, and we'll work it out. But believe me, you're way ahead of the game. You really are way ahead of the game. And most people just need that kind of adjustment. Yeah. What's
I can look at it the other way. Like now I feel like a bigger douche for even needing a therapist or wanting a therapist in the first place because it could be so much worse.
No.
Like, I've really got it together. Like, what am I whining about?
It just backfired, didn't it? Just like, man, I talked to that Dr. Will and now I just feel like hell. No. It's
but if it gets bad enough, then I really will need a therapist.
It's like you're when you're struggling with adjustment. See, the other loopy thing in this that's changed. I mean, I've been a therapist for 27 years. The big difference in the past 10 to 15 is the brain research, the physiological differences that have come along with the brain. It's unbelievable because people come and they have symptoms, and they have physical symptoms, and then they have emotional symptoms. Psychology is really increasingly about the functioning of your brain, and a lot of people who have symptoms, their brain gets flooded. And so, like anxiety, let's take anxiety. I'm dealing with someone who has a lot of anxiety, panic attacks. Okay, that's a physical symptom. Now you think about, it's a psychological thing. Well, yeah, what does that mean? It means that this person's body is overtaking their ability to be calm and focused. And when your frontal cortex shuts down because it's kind of into the fight or flight thing, you can't process. Psychotherapy is basically you're borrowing my frontal cortex to sort of assess it and look at and give you some balance again. I work a lot with law enforcement. With law enforcement.
That's why you're not having a beer with me.
Well, yeah, because I have to do some therapy tonight. Yeah. But I really got very interested in the past 10 years in this area of chronic stress versus acute stress. And first responders, police and fire, are a good sort of laboratory, if you will, about that because the research shows that the human body has amazing ability to cope with acute stress. Like let's say you're in a car crash or just something happens, you witness something horrible, and you have a trauma, and like your whole system's elevated. The back of your brain takes over, and it's like, the human body has amazing ability to recover without any damage at all from that. We have very poor equipment to handle chronic stress. Chronic stress is this low-grade gnawing where, that's what kills your blood. The guy who started this was a guy named Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University. And he did it by studying baboons. It's really interesting. 30 years ago, he went to study baboons. And his thesis was that baboons, their physiology was enough like us. You ever see a baboon? I was like, I always wish they were
like at the zoo.
Yeah. I always wish they were wearing slacks. I mean, there's really not a good thing to look at.
I could see that.
But anyway, but the reason he studied them was because they're a highly social tribe of animals. The alpha males at the top rules the roost, and then down, all the way down to the females, they're dominated by the alpha male. And his thesis was that the alpha male would have the healthiest blood, least stress. Good to be the king. But then when you went down the food chain, they would have more cortisol, more stress hormone. They're
got to be the opposite.
Exactly. And so it was like, so it was, sure enough, they took blood tests and they said, the alpha males have the healthiest blood. They do well. The more you're dominated and feel oppressed and can't control what's going on for you, even if you think you're coping psychologically, it tells in your blood. That's, diabetes and clogged arteries.
So it's not the opposite?
No. It's, in other words, it's what you would suspect that if you have power and control and you feel like you're in charge, it's a healthier option than if you're dominated and you feel like you're always having to please and the people on top of you. So anyway, an entrepreneur is someone who has that alpha inclination.
I talk about this. I've said it a million times, especially when giving people advice hey Josh, I'm thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. I have this idea and I want to start this business. And my first piece of advice is that it's going to destroy your life. It's the worst idea you've ever had. I mean, be prepared to lose your house, your wife, your whatever. I mean, you may as well just light it on fire right now. And if you're okay with that, then
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of it, it's also the most gratifying thing
Yep.
that you'll
That's right.
ever do. Because my life is a giant roller coaster. There's these incredible highs and then there's these incredible lows. But for some reason, it's very copable. Yeah.
You're a resilient person. In other words, you go through and you feel and you experience the lows that have kind of come upon you, but then you have a strong resilience to like fight back and say, okay, well, what's next?
Is it the delusion? Like I guess I'm trying to relate it to what you were just saying about it's good to be king thing.
Yep.
Because I feel like the stress levels are higher at that point. Because
No, you know what? I'm sorry. No, that's a really good observation and point. But what we're talking about here, the highs are sort of the emotional flood of high, but even if you're an entrepreneur and you're still in charge, you are still at the mercy of forces you can't control.
Right.
And those are the if not the alpha persons, it's the alpha pressure of what you can't control.
So it's forces I cannot control, but
Yes.
I can always control my ability to move within those forces.
Bingo. It's exactly right.
Right, and that's the only. I'm just wondering if you're oppressed and the people that have to work for me can only move within my range.
So in other words, here's something that's
Unless they pull the pin like Warren and just say,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. But
Another great story.
think about this. In other words, the entrepreneur and it takes off. And how common is this story in your field? You know this. You have an entrepreneur with brilliant perception, brilliant vision. It starts to come together. It starts to congeal. It starts to come together. And all of a sudden, more people are involved, more systems are involved. And suddenly now you're not a sole operator. You are overseeing. You know that's a dicey point where how do I keep everyone who's now joined me to actualize this vision happy and connected and
pull the same direction.
Because the baboon scenario says that if they feel like they're shut out from the excitement of the vision, they will start to feel the pressure of that. And so it's a pretty telling experiment. That's why when you go to your doctor and you give blood, like just have blood sample, and you get that sheet back with 30 things that they've seen in there, is they're looking at your blood as the window into your health. 90 million Americans have type 2 diabetes. Only 10 million know they do. Now, diabetes is a blood
Holy
issue.
shit, yeah.
That's right. And so it's a blood issue, which means like I look fine from the outside, but I'm kind of a slow cooking mess on the inside.
Yeah, my cholesterol's a little high.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. So you're at that stage where you are in charge as an entrepreneur and going at it, and you have control of all the decisions about how to move this thing forward, but you are still at the mercy of and under the domination, if you will, of stuff that's outside that continues to thwart or get in the way. So your advice to entrepreneurs is spot on. It's like just, I remember John Lovett in A League of Their Own when this guy was on the train. He goes, well, if I get this territory, I'll be the lead salesman. And Lovett goes, yeah, that's great. If I had your life, I'd kill myself. So that's what you're saying. It's like, you better be prepared.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's right. You've got to be prepared. It's like, this is the most thrilling thing you've ever done, just as you said, and it's also going to like rock your world. Are you ready for that part of it? Yeah. So,
and most people just completely. I mean, they go into that's never going to happen to me, which is exactly what I did. Like that would never happen to me.
Exactly.
I do that with every step of the way. It's like, we call it what do we call it? My reality distortion field. I have an amazing reality distortion field.
It's a good skill.
I've found that if you just are ridiculous enough to think that you can accomplish something, odds are you're going to get close. I mean.
No, it's true. It's really true. I mean, there is some science to this idea that's sort of began as like an Eastern thing and still has kind of a woo-woo thing to it called creative visualization. And there's good science to that you keep visualizing where you want to be in very vivid terms. And you actually make progress toward having that come true. And so you do that. I mean, you can, even if it's just at night before you go to sleep or something, just think about, oh man, now I'm at this stage and this is what's happened and this has come together. And that's what actually makes that stuff happen. You will it into reality.
You literally will it into reality.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
that's right.
What is it? I think it's a Steve Jobs quote. The people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Be the change you want to see. I mean, and so look what you're doing. I mean, a podcast, I'm sitting here with this unbelievable, mind-blowing invention, this thing where beer comes up from the bottle of a glass. That's like genie stuff. That's unbelievable.
It's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen.
Yes, incredible. Absolutely.
It came out of my brain.
See, there you go.
It's a good.
And you know what's interesting, and I think this is helpful to keep in mind. You know, right now, as an entrepreneur, a person who's wired as an entrepreneur, this is your thing now.
Do you think that is necessary? Do you think somebody that's not wired as an entrepreneur can become an entrepreneur?
Well, it's now you're getting into the area, and I mean this seriously, about resilience. You have to be resilient. And so, the research on what makes a person resilient is about 30 years old. And it used to be like, oh, it's just your genetics. You know what? Well, yeah, that's one part of it. But there are two other variables that are very, very powerful in being resilient. So anyone out there who, saying, well, I can't be an entrepreneur because, I come from a family that's really compromised, a real mess. That's only one part of it.
I was going to say that could be the exact reason you should be an entrepreneur.
Well, that's right. Because usually in those situations, the other variable with resilience is there was somebody young or throughout your childhood who believed in you, and you kind of fed off what they gave you. Even if, mom and dad were imperfect or family, if there was someone you could hold on to, whether it's an uncle, a teacher, somebody like that, whatever. But then the telling thing going forward is a social support system. I mean, that's what matters. That's what I had with the comics. Because as lonely as it is when you're feeling, well, no one's, hire. I mean, like I'm working in the clubs, but it's like, I'm not going anywhere. 6 or 7 years, nothing's happening. But it's with the other comics hanging out at night. At the clubs after hours that gets you through because you're all in that same boat. So that social support system will keep you going. So, so that's a cautionary tale for the individual entrepreneur. It's not just about the support you have with your coworkers or the people working for you. You really need people who are going to stand by you shoulder to shoulder and hang with you and say, you can do it. You can do it. Yeah. And you're going to. I'll be one of those guys. I'm one of those guys. I'm moving in here right now.
I really appreciate it. Professional shrink supporting the efforts. It's good. I'm not even paying you.
No, that's right. No, I'll be happy to just be the spokesman. No. He's not able to come to the microphone now. He's very busy succeeding. We'd appreciate if you'd go out in the lobby and sit down.
Oh man, there's a bajillion things that I want to talk to you about because we've wanted a therapist on the show forever.
Like, well, I can come back. I'm only up the road. I can come back, I mean, I'm happy to come back.
This is going to happen.
We'll work on that. Yeah.
So what I found is lots of things. So one of the best parts of my job is I've slowly started, and I realized this over the course of spending my own amount of time in therapy, is that I'm learning to be a therapist.
Yeah.
And working with my employees. And I mean, it was a couple of weeks ago now, I'm sitting there talking to her and I'm like, well, when people come in your office and then they're sitting there and, most of the time they just let them talk and they talk themselves into what their answer is. And I'm like, I'm doing that right now with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. Exactly. That word empathy gets underused. And empathy means like, look, my story is different than your story, but I've been in emotional places where you are and you'll come out of it. And, okay, you're in this spot now. There was a time I was in that spot, but now I'm farther ahead and I'm okay. You'll come out of this just the way I came out of that. So
I struggle with empathy. And I was talking about it the other day with my therapist, and I said, I struggle with empathy. And she's like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Maybe I just struggle with communicating.
Oh, yeah, well, that could be an issue. Yeah,
maybe.
That's right, yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe what's the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Empathy means that, sympathy means it's kind of this term sounds weird, pathetic. It's like, you feel a pathos for somebody. Oh boy, that's miserable what they're going through. Empathy is like, oh boy, I know some of that feeling. It's used, for example, when someone goes through a tragedy. Like, okay, say someone was in a car, someone is in a car wreck. Okay, well, you're sympathetic. You feel terrible that they're in a car wreck. But for you in particular, it's like, hey, 6 years ago, I was in a car wreck. I know what that's like to feel helpless. That's empathy. There's a woman who studies this. It's a great book. I think you'll love the title. It's called The Sociopath Next Door.
I do love the title.
Okay, that's Sociopath Next Door. Martha Stout, S-T-O-U-T. Yes. And Martha Stout's from Harvard. She's a psychologist. And she's written kind of the book that sort of defines. Now, a sociopath is someone who feels no empathy. I mean, they don't feel anyone else's feelings. They
All
have
right.
no empathy.
You're headed down a road I want to, yeah.
Exactly.
This is great.
So this is what's really interesting is this is what sends a chill up your spine with this book. She's studied this, and she says the epidemiology, in other words, the frequency of people who don't have a conscience, is 4% in the population. Okay, that's 1 in 25. 1 in 25 people is a sociopath. Now, here's the point that she makes, and it's so true. It's like you think about a sociopath, and naturally your mind goes toward very low functioning sociopaths in prison. Guys who hurt people. And all that stuff. But it's the CEO of a company who closes down the whole plant and then goes on TV and can act as if they have conscience. Oh, we're really sorry that we have to let go all these people. We're going to do everything we can. And then the microphone goes off and it's like, they don't give a shit. They don't feel it. They're talking as if they feel it. And those are the people who really do a lot of damage, across in their relationships because they don't feel it. We don't know why they don't feel it. Yeah. We don't know how it happens. Is it just genetic? Is it, we don't know. So
trauma related. Or?
Possibly, yes. I know with there's another diagnosis that's pretty hefty, and it affects women more than men. It's called borderline personality disorder. If you ever meet someone and the word borderline comes up, immediately leave the relationship. It's just what was the one with Glenn Close and Michael Douglas where she killed the rabbit and remember that?
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. I will not be ignored. She was a borderline personality disorder, and the key with them is, and this will send a chill up the spine of some people listening. It's that these are the people who are the warmest and friendliest people. They make friendships really easy. Oh, it's great. Hey, we're now buddies. It's Jim Carrey and the Cable Guy. It's like, it's great. It's great. It's great. But then as soon as they have a sense that you're abandoning them, pulling away from them, the flip comes out and they go nuts. Their anger is completely out of proportion to what it ought to be. And so that's her in, I will not be ignored. And Jim Carrey, oh, Billy, it's called splitting. They don't have any ambivalence in the middle. They either love or hate. There's nothing in the middle. And sociopaths are just manipulative. So isn't this happy? So you're going to,
that's great.
Yeah. So, everyone
I talk about
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Because we've talked about it on the show a couple times now. And what's really funny is a girl I used to date. We're hanging out in my living room, and she's reading this book on psychopaths. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, she gets to a part where there's a test, and I'm like, oh, I'll take the test. Mm-hmm. Pass the fucking test. she's like, it says you're a psychopath.
What were the symptoms in particular that rattle you?
Nothing really rattled me because I felt all of them. I mean, we could bring one up online and I could take it right now. But then I became, this is kind of when I started to really become intrigued with psychology and everything behind.
It's a fascinating area, yeah.
Entrepreneurialism and just people in general. Really learning more about myself because that kind of sparked. Like I love to know about things. Deciding to know more about myself has been one of the most amazing journeys I've been on. Yep. And it started about 2 years ago. So it was, I started researching it, and a lot of entrepreneurs have psychopathic tendencies. Well, a sense of self-grandeur.
I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use psychopath. See, psychopath is someone without a conscience who enjoys the suffering of other people. That's not that. This is what you're talking about is narcissism.
Is it? Okay, I mean you're the psychologist.
Narcissism. Freud was the one who coined the term, and it was from Greek mythology, where Narcissus looked in the lake and saw his reflection and could not. He was just taken with this. It's complete involvement with the self. Everybody is narcissistic. Yeah. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're a self-starter, especially if you're young, it's like, yes, your narcissism is the tool that's helping you be self-caring to push ahead for yourself. That's different than at the same time wanting to be abusive toward or harmful to the people around you who are not involved in your project.
In this test, that was one of the harmful questions were the ones that I did not get. But you only had to get a certain percentage to qualify.
Absolutely.
Mine was minus the harmful tendencies.
Yeah, there's no way you're a psychopath.
I don't know.
No,
the test said so, Dr.
No,
Will.
no, it didn't. No.
All right. Well, question here then is psychopath and sociopath. Maybe they're mixing the two up. Maybe they're
sociopath is very different than psychopath.
Well, I get that,
Yes,
but
it
I
is.
wasn't sure if.
But a psychopath is somebody, that's the serial killer. That's the someone
Right.
who is actually taking joy. A sociopath and psychopath, sometimes the earliest signs are like, abusing animals.
Right.
Not having the capacity to understand the suffering of another creature. And you see that in childhood, for example.
Well, I guess then the secondary question then would be, can you go down that path without being the deranged one, the one that
Yes.
kills?
Yeah, that's what Martha Stout's talking about. It's
Okay.
like if the epidemiology is 1 out of 25, it means there are some extremely highly successful people with families, etc. If you read her book, she gives some really cool case studies in there about people who have like this guy who's the CEO of a company, sociopath. But he has a very, very successful, happy life, it seems, because he uses people to maneuver them. But then everyone sort of gets a piece of his success, and his wife is, made to, and children are made to be sort of passive and, bow down to Big Daddy. And so, in other words, they've constructed and put together a life that works for them, even though inside their only motivation is gratification of the self. That's sociopathology and psychopathology are narcissism run amok.
Okay.
Okay, narcissism run amok. There's not an 18-year-old, 28-year-old, 40-year-old in the career path who doesn't have healthy narcissistic impulses to be successful. That's what it takes to be successful. You got to think about yourself. If you have none of that, you're, what's the technical term? A loser. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just kind of mailed it in. But yet, okay, now I'm being a total wise ass. But then there are people who don't have that narcissistic tendency. I think this will come out sensitively. I mean this. I was just speaking, I just gave a speech to a big tech company in California. And we're at this incredible resort in Carmel Valley, California. Rich. And it was interesting because, in addition to the executives who were there, I also, talked to the staff, because I didn't tell you this before. When I was first training at Columbia, did I tell you what my supervisor said to us?
No.
He said, let me tell you, he's from Brooklyn. He goes, let me tell you something. If you're not very, very nosy, you cannot be a therapist. You've got to be nosy and curious.
Yeah.
So I talked to the staff and others. And there are people, and a lot of the Latino workers who were there, when I talk to them and inquire, they appear to have, it's a generalization, very happy lives that are not consumed with self-motivation, aggrandizement, success in business. I mean, their gratification for themselves comes in their family, their children, their work, etc. They're happy to serve the narcissistic needs of the employer who takes care of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how the world works. And you're in that position where you have an inclination to be successful and to take care of people who come and enjoy what your powerful motivation and, yes, healthy narcissism is creating for them. So you're way more frickin' fine than you think you are.
Healthy
Which means that there is something wrong with you because your perceptions are.
Yes. I was watching a TED Talk on it. So it was I'm terrible at remembering the names of things, but it was a TED Talk on a writer, or it was done by a writer, and he was trying to debunk Scientology. He's hanging out with these Scientologists, and they're talking about how psychotherapy is total BS. And so he's like, well, how? I mean, prove it. Like, what do you mean? Prove it that psychotherapy is BS. He's like, well, we've got this guy who's in a mental hospital, a maximum security mental hospital, and he doesn't belong there. He was put in there. He faked it, and he faked it a little too good, and now he's stuck in there, and they won't let him out. So can we make this introduction so you can see what we're talking about? Well, he goes and he goes to this place. He meets him. Guy's completely normal, dressed nice, doesn't look like anybody else in the building. Long story short, he gets back around, and the doctors are saying, well, anyone that would fake being a psychopath is a psychopath. And that was the gist of it. So it was it was pretty funny. You'd have to watch the TED Talk.
Well,
I'm butchering it, but
no, it's and it's pardon me. when you work active in the mental health field, no matter what your discipline is, if you're a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a social worker or a counselor,
social workers, that's got to be a rough one.
Yeah, you come across all of the different disciplines and what their focus is. And I have to tell you, having worked in clinics a lot, it's interesting what's going on in psychiatry, because psychiatry is kind of like that's the premier discipline. You can medications, etc. But I think most working therapists will tell you that they've come across too many psychiatrists that are very narrowly limited to understanding the chemical issues that are going on and want to medicate their way out of it, and oftentimes don't seem to give enough credence to the psychological or sociological issues. There's a term in mental health that every mental health practitioner learns. It's called biopsychosocial approach. When someone comes to you challenged with something, I need to become a therapist, you first must eliminate anything biological. If there's anything biological going on, and it's like it's kind of rough illustrations of that are erratic behavior and anger. Well, are you dealing with a brain tumor? Seriously, is it bio? So you rule that out. Psychological. What's the psychological stuff that's going on in your life? What traumas have you overcome, etc. And then social. What's your social environment? And the example I use there is like with children. My wife's a school principal, and so the school nurse or the school social worker, if a kid begins to behave really badly in school, well, the inclination is, oh, this child is troubled. Well, maybe not. Maybe the kid is behaving completely appropriately because his family is completely toxic and awful, and his acting out is a symptom of the family being the patient, not the kid.
Yeah, or maybe you're not challenging him in ways that he needs to be challenged.
Exactly. Yeah. Hello, McFly. I was there. That's right. And so, behavior is just a set of symptoms. Just like in addictions, for example. Addictions. I remember down at this drug clinic, the supervisor used to say, here we actually begin with a very simple definition of an addiction. It's an irresistible impulse to change your mood. If you think about that in the broadest terms, it means that...
Say it one more time.
It's an irresistible impulse to change your mood. You're not comfortable in the mood you're in, and so you want to change the mood. And so when it involves substances, alcohol or drugs or something, well, it kind of makes sense. It's like, but what it tells you is that the use of the substance is not the core problem. It's the inability to sit still and be okay with your mood.
Are you familiar with the theory of constraints?
Tell me more.
So, theory of constraints. It was developed by Eli Goldratt. I use it all the time. My brain just naturally solves problems in that way. I found the book, and it in the process of working through the theory of constraints, you start by building a current reality tree, and it looks for underlying problems. So like you a lot of times it's exactly what you're talking about, and I find them relating more and more the more I do my own research, is that there's a more often than not what people perceive as a problem is not the actual problem. It's caused by a core problem. And we do it for work all the time. We'll take Post-it notes out and say, what's the problem? And we'll slap it at the top of the wall, and we'll say, why? And then we slap the Post-it notes under that, why? And then we get all the way down to the bottom, and we're like, well, this is actually the problem.
Exactly right.
Right here. Not that. That's not the problem.
That's the symptom.
That's a symptom. I don't need Adderall for that. We got to fix this, and then I don't need anything.
Exactly right.
So do you use any process like that?
Oh, totally. I think it's just, in other words, I think it's a parallel rhetoric to the same process that we're talking about. It's like, and again, that's the hunt of psychotherapy. It's like, the cliche is, tell me about your mother. You know what I mean? It's like you want to get back to the roots, because it's like, what happened? What kind of difficulty did you overcome? So, for example, say in relationship problems, okay, and you have a relationship, and you find out, although up at the top the symptoms are fighting about money, sex, whatever it is, but when you get beneath it, it's like, well, actually, no, you were looking for someone to take care of you, and you were looking for someone you could take care of. And when that gets out of balance, because the one who wants to be taken care of all of a sudden decides they don't want to be taken care of anymore, not by you, it upsets the whole chemistry. But the root goes back to that person when they were young had parents who didn't take care of them well, and so that's what they're on the hunt for. It's an amazing search, and I love therapy because it's like every life's a fingerprint, and every story is amazing.
And they're all fascinating.
They are fascinating.
Like this story has been fascinating, and that's a good point to end on.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more I want to talk about, from
I'll come back.
Microdosing with psilocybin mushrooms to, I mean, there's
Yeah, exactly.
all kinds of stuff that I want to cover.
I'm renting
here.
a Winnebago, and I'm going to be parked out here for the next couple of months. So.
Okay, yeah. We need therapy on the show.
It's a delight.
It's been great having you on. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry it's been so short.
That's okay. It's fantastic.
It's been
We'll
a
do it
great
again.
episode.
Good.
Yeah. That's my dick pic. That's a better one. It's all about perspective.